Hi, I'm Andrea with Pacific Composting, and today we're going to be building a do-it-yourself worm bin. This is an easy and affordable solution for anyone that's thinking of getting into worm composting but not sure if it's quite right for them. So first off, we need a bin itself. We're looking for one that's 30 to 70 liters in size. We love going with the Home Depot HDX bins. We find them really rugged. You want to make sure whichever type of bin you use that it's not a clear one. It definitely has to be a dark bin. Then you're going to need a drill with a 1/4-inch bit. You're going to need various habitat and bedding materials, some food, as well as some amendments. And of course, we can't forget about our worms. In order for these worms to get proper ventilation, we're going to start drilling some holes. We're going to look into doing 20 to 30 holes on the lid, and then going around the top edge of the bin, you're looking for around 10 to 20 holes. We're going to get started here and start drilling some holes. Okay, so here we have all of the holes on our lids done. Now, something that's really important to note is that you have to make sure that you're removing all the plastic debris out of these holes and making sure that they're nice and smooth. Otherwise, it can be really harmful to the worms. Just gonna make sure all of this debris is gone. All right, so that's our lid. All right. Next up are holes that are going around the top edge here of the bin. You're looking to do around 10 to 20, as I mentioned. So these holes we already went ahead and did. Okay, so now it's time to have some fun. So we've got all of our holes drilled. So we've got the air covered for our worms. So next up, it's time to make their environment. Now, we often approach this as a 3-zone system. So you're gonna have a false bottom that's gonna be with bulky, dry materials. So we're gonna start off with this. Gonna get some of this shredded cardboard in. All right. So here we go. We've got around 1/8 or so of the volume. Okay, now we're going to proceed with mixing up our worm zone mix. We highly suggest everybody to use the materials you have readily available. For us on the farm, we have all sorts of materials, but you can use shredded cardboard, cocoa core, you can use torn up egg cartons. You're going to want to try and balance it out. It's really important to have at least 3-4 materials that have different consistencies because they all have different water absorption and air ventilation capacities. So in our case here, we've got our triple bedding mix that we often use. It consists of cocoa core, hemp tow, and shredded cardboard. So I'm going to start off putting some of that in here. Okay, next up, we want to activate our system basically. So you're looking to put the microbes in there. This is some living material that's left over that has various types of finished composts, castings, mulches, all sorts of materials. That's going to bring in a lot of the beneficial microbes for our system. Give that a bit of a mix in. Next up, we've got some horse manure here. I'm going to get some of that in. It's also bedded horse manure, so there's various other carbon materials in here. And here's some dairy solids. I'm going to get some of that mixed in. Just a note for your living materials. Now, a lot of us don't have access to many of these materials like horse manure, dairy solids, things like that. So what you can add instead is finished compost. You can add leaf mulches. You can add worm castings from another system, or some EM, some effective microorganisms. Anything that's going to kickstart your system and inject those highly valuable microbes right into your system. Okay, so we're continuing to mix up our worm zone. That's going to take up roughly 3/4. So if you remember, we did 1/8. That's the false bottom, so it's dry, bulky materials. That's going to help with moisture management at the bottom of your bin. Now we've got 3/4 of the bin. That's going to be the worm zone mix. And then finally at the top, we're going to have our cover bedding, which was going to also account for around 1/8 of the volume. So here we are with all of these amazing materials that we just assembled, living materials, habitat materials, all of this. Now, these are optional, but they really go a long way for the worm health and reproduction. So a few things that you can add if you have them available to you. One is biochar. When you're initially getting your system going, it's a really great opportunity to get it mixed all in with all of your bedding materials. So we're going to get around a cup or so of biochar in there. Then we're also going to get some pH buffer grit as well. Get some of that sprinkled in. And then we are also going to add some of our Pacific Composting Worm Boost. It's one of our newest products. It's a worm nutritional supplement that's actually really balanced with high carbon materials as well, which you don't see too often in these products. So it's a great blend that's going to help worm health and reproduction and just balancing out the system. So we've got a few tablespoons in there. So these are our amendments, and I'm going to give them more of a mix. Okay, so now we're going to add the worm zone mix that we've carefully mixed up with all sorts of goodies. We're going to get that in and place it above our false bottom, which in our case we use shredded cardboard. And now we're going to add a small amount of food initially. It's really important that it's a small amount of food to get the microbes blooming. Just make a little hole over here, a little depression. Put the food in there. You can also, if you'd like, add a little bit of worm boost to balance it out. And then we're going to cover that right back up. This is one of the most important things in worm composting, is just making sure that your food deposits are always covered. So a fun fact with worms about food is that they actually derive most of their nutrition from microbes, not the actual food itself. So that's why it's important to initially get a small deposit going in there to get those microbes blooming, to ease the transition of the worms into their new space. Okay, so now it's the fun part. We get to add the worms. So something really important to note, that if you add living materials, then you can actually add the worms into the system the same day. But if you don't, you're going to want to wait at least 2-3 days for microbes to start blooming on the little food deposit that you just made. Our worms are carefully packed in these burlap hemp sacks that allow the worms, all the bedding materials, everything to breathe really well during transport. We also pack these bags with some of our triple bedding mix that consists of the cocoa core, hemp tow, and shredded cardboard. We also have all sorts of living materials in here, so it'll provide some food for the worms during travel. So as this material is inoculated, it's going to help ease the transition of the worms into their new home. See some of these worms. Okay, now here are our worms. You can gently spread them out. And then get some of this other material, cover them up a little bit, and then let themselves work their way down the system on their own. Okay, the last zone in our 3-zone system is the cover bedding up top. It's really, really important to have a thick cover bedding. It inhibits any fruit flies and other pests coming in, laying eggs. It's just really important for moisture management as well. So always maintain a thick cover bedding over your worm zone and food deposits. Now, we're going to use a worm blanket here. I cut it down to the size for this bin. So you can put it directly over the worm zone here. Just fit it right in there. And the worms absolutely love these fibers. They're going to start digging through them in no time. You're going to lift this up and there's going to be worms just crawling all through it. And they love laying their cocoons as well in the hemp blankets and hemp tow. And then your last material here is a bit more shredded cardboard to go on the top to act as your cover bedding and barrier, basically. Okay, so now that you've got your do-it-yourself worm bin all set up, you've got all your habitat materials in there, bedding, you've got some food, the worms are tucked in, you've got some cover bedding as well, it's time to give them a light watering in. We always pre-moisten all of our habitat and bedding materials prior to putting them in these bins and adding the worms into the system, but it's also important just for when you're initially getting the system set up to give a light watering in. So I'm going to peel back some of our cover bedding. So as you may remember, we've got some shredded cardboard, and then we do have a worm blanket as well underneath that. So I'm going to pull that back, and we've got a little wormy friend going right there. So here you're trying to go for damp, not overly wet. Now, everybody's materials are going to be different depending on how much moisture was added when you were even incorporating the materials, what type of materials they are, how bulky, what kind of airflow they have, things like that. So our recommendation is really just kind of trying to feel that material that you have between your hands and really going for a moist but not overly wet kind of habitat. You never want to do a super huge watering where you're just literally pouring over the majority of a watering can and then you have pooling at the bottom of the system. That is something you want to avoid at all times. So since we have the materials on one side here, we're just going to water half the system at a time. All right, you can take a little break, just kind of see how that water is infiltrating into the system, how deep it's going. That's really nice up in the bunch, up in probably the top 3-4 inches. So I'm just going to give a little bit more to get a tiny bit deeper in there. And that's probably good for your initial watering on that side of the system. Now we're going to peel it back and then repeat on the other side. All right. Again, I'm just going to kind of take a little mid-break here. Give that a few seconds, let it infiltrate. And then let's see how deep it's getting. Yeah, that's getting quite nicely down there. Yeah, I would just give that side just a tiny little bit more as well. And that's great for your initial watering. Now, as many will know, with plastic systems, they do retain moisture really well. And so it's important to note that this is probably one of the only times that you're really going to be watering in the system, especially if you're giving a lot of water-rich foods. So one thing that you can do, where if you feel like the material is nice and damp and moist, but the top is perhaps a little drier than it should be, instead of using a water can, you can potentially mist it as well. So you're giving a nice even coating around the top surface layer, and while you're not super saturating all of your habitat materials. Remember, they like it moist, but not overly wet. So there you have it. It's easy as that to build a do-it-yourself worm bin. A few things to note that are important. When you do your first feed, do it after a few days once the worms have had some time to get used to their new environment. Second of all, in every aspect with worms, it's really important to disturb them as least amount as possible. So when feeding, do it maybe once, max twice a week. You can also find on our website detailed instructions on how to build these worm bins. You can do the simple one bin approach, or there's also the double bin approach. You can also find out how to feed worms and ongoing maintenance and troubleshooting. Thanks so much for watching our video, and we hope you enjoyed it.